great pleasure to hand over to our guest presenters this morning. They're going to introduce themselves and present their research on the natural dye garden, growth and recovery from sexual violence through gardening and craft. So I'm going to hand over to Autumn, Emma and Lara.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm just going to share my screen and then we'll get started.
I'll just spotlight you, Emma.
Thank you. Hey, hopefully everyone can see my screen okay?
Yep.
Is that working?
Got one little box just down, that's it. Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, brilliant. So thank you for having us, everybody. As Jenny mentioned, we're going to be talking about a natural dye garden project at Birkhill House in the Scottish Borders. I'm going to quickly move on to the next slide so we can all introduce ourselves and then we'll get started. Okay, so I'll let you go first, Lara, and you've got Sunshine with you today as well.
Thanks, Emma. I'm Lara Armitage. I'm director at Birkhill House. Sunshine Stewart is my colleague and deputy director here, and she leads the natural dye part of our offering. And yeah, we had come up with the project that we ran in conjunction with the Scottish Borders Rape Crisis Centre, which began in 2022. And that's what we'll be talking about today.
Thanks, Lara. That's great. And Autumn?
Hi, everybody. I'm Autumn Roesch-Marsh, and I work at the University of Edinburgh. I'm part of something called the Binks Hub, which is a research hub that's dedicated to co-creating research with practitioners, with community groups using creative and artistically engaged methodologies. And it was my absolute honor and pleasure to get involved in this project kind of after it was over, to try and support Lara and Emma and Sunshine to tell the story of the fabulous work they've been doing and the impact that it's been making. So hopefully that their knowledge and their practice wisdom will be of value to lots of people all over the world, even though the project took place in one part of Scotland. So welcome to everyone, and it's lovely to see you.
Thanks, Autumn. And I'm Emma Martindale. I work with Trellis as the Training and Standards Officer, and I also work as a field worker providing support to projects all around Lothians and the Borders. So I supported Lara and Sunshine with getting the project up and running some of the sessions as well. And we've included a little screen grab of the article there. And I can make sure that the link for that's shared with you if you want to read the research article. Okay. So over to you, Lara.
Okay, thank you. We thought we would just tell you a little bit about at Birkhill House CIC. At Birkhill House CIC is an animal-assisted activity and crafting centre near Earlston in the Scottish Borders. We also offer a variety of horticultural opportunities for visiting groups and individuals. Our mission is to improve mental health in the Scottish Borders through caring, creativity, and collaboration. We're set on 9 acres of beautiful land. We're about 30 miles south of Edinburgh city centre. The workshop spaces are renovated stables, which date back to the 1800s. We also have a new building, which has just been completed, our fleece and fibre hub. With a rich farming and equine history, the property is now a busy smallholding. So our residents include Wakaya alpacas, rare breed Castle Milk Moor sheep, pygmy and golden Guernsey goats, ragdoll cats, hens, ducks, peafowl, some dogs, more, lots of creatures. And all of those things feed into our holistic program that we run here. That's the next slide. We engage with local groups and schools to provide bespoke sessions that offer opportunities to be creative, spend time with our animals, enjoy nature, and obviously help with the gardens here as well. These are some pictures of some of our volunteers and some of the attendees who come for group work here. And there's a picture of the dye garden there as well. And if I could get the next slide. So the dye garden idea was born sort of about this lonely piece of ground in the northern corner of the property, which we would occasionally stick the goats on to keep the grass down. And it's just like kind of really rocky and definitely needed development and a bit of thought. And it was just a kind of meeting about something else entirely with the director of the Scottish Borders Rape Crisis Centre, which led to a discussion around starting a dye garden here. It was an idea we had. And Susie Stein thought that it fit really well with their own aims and objectives in terms of encouraging gardening for mental health with some of their service users. So that idea was kind of born. And so we decided to enter into a partnership on that project. So if I could just get the next slide. The crossover with SBRCC and at Birkhill House CIC included person-centered approach that was kind of user-led and informed by what was important to those who have had lived experience. It was underpinned by trauma-enforced principles. SBRCC builds relationships in which trust, collaboration, safety, choice, and empowerment are at the heart of their ethos, value, and support. And those are the tenets that guide the work that we do as well. So the fit between the two organizations was really a natural one. The hurdle was how to fund the project. But luckily, it was right around that time that the government launched their Mental Health and Wellbeing Grant Fund. So that opened not long after that fortuitous conversation, and we were successful in obtaining support to offer an 18-month project to establish the natural dye garden here. And SBRCC agreed to fund transport for those wishing to attend, and also to send along a one-to-one support worker for each session who could be there for general support and breakout sessions if need be. If we could get the next slide. In terms of practicalities and logistics, safety, we ensured that the 9-acre premises was entirely clear of others. We have the benefit of that as we're not a project that's generally open to the public. Everything here is done by appointment only. So there was a safety in that. Transport to ensure that access was easy and manageable. So everybody who was participating was picked up at their door and dropped off again at their door. There was an activity agreement that we put into place, so guidelines to encourage survivors not to share details of their trauma, to be respectful, to try to engage and join in, and be mindful of photography, and other points that we had laid out in the agreement, which was read at the beginning of every session. And as I said, there was one-to-one support. So there was always an SBRCC worker present at the sessions in case someone felt triggered or unable to cope with the effects of their trauma. And there were breakout spaces as well, which were safe areas where people could leave the group to go and be supported there. So that's sort of a bit about the initial steps we took to get the project up and running. And I think Emma was going to talk a bit now about just what is a natural dye garden and how the project began to take shape. So Emma, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Lara. So yeah, I think some people here might know what a natural dye garden is, might have seen dye plants before, or maybe have visited a dye garden, and others, well, I was certainly one of the others, might have never visited a dye garden and haven't really thought too much about dye garden plants before, although maybe have an awareness that we can take colours from plants. So essentially a dye garden is a place where plants are propagated for colour, and the colour can be obtained from all different parts of the plant. So for some it might be flowers, leaves, stems or roots. And for any plant, it might be that different parts of the plant can give different colours, or different combinations of the above might give different colours. So it's definitely, it brought some new plants into my repertoire of the different gardening that I've done in the past. So that was a super interesting part of the process for me, although Lara and Sunshine would have, had quite a lot of knowledge in that area already. In terms of using the plants, it was new for some of us in terms of growing them. And Lara had wanted to propagate these plants and take the dyes from them so that they could add to the repertoire of activities they were already doing at Birkhill. So they were already using the fleeces and the materials from the alpacas and the sheep, but they wanted to be able to add new colours into the activities they were already doing, and also to be able to use dyes that were local and responsibly sourced. And also that would then give a new activity that wasn't happening at Birkhill, to offer a way of allowing people to connect with the gardens and the outdoor space at Birkhill, through growing the dye garden plants, and then also getting involved with the crafting and the art side through using those natural dyes. So it added lots of activities that people could take part in. And so, as I mentioned, there were plants that were new to me that I'm sure Lara and Sunshine had used before, but we thought we would include some photos of the lovely plants that we grew, and just kind of let you know the main ones that we used. And I'm sure Lara and Sunshine can maybe add in here because I've probably forgotten one of the ones that we used. But on the left, we've got Dyer's Coreopsis, and then that big circular pot in the middle is Dyer's Chamomile. So those two we grew lots and lots of. We had big beds full of them, and there was lots of harvesting of those flowers for using for dyeing, but also we pressed a lot of the flowers and used them in different arts and crafts and journaling as well. And we also grew calendula and goldenrod and two different types of indigo, madder, weld, and then some other flowers like cosmos were grown as well, particularly for use in pressing. And I think towards the end of my time with Birkhill, we were also growing hollyhocks as well. I don't know if there's anything I've forgotten, Lara and Sunshine, any other main plants that we were growing?
There was a bit of woad
Yeah,
in
we did
there,
have
Woad.
which is your blue as well. And I think you were there for the start of the mullein, which
Yes.
grew to be about 10 foot high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, that's a good catalogue of pretty much what we had in
Yeah.
the ground. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a super colourful garden, and then also the harvesting, as you can see in these photos, the harvesting created lovely colourful containers of flowers, and it was a really popular activity, the harvesting of the flowers. Okay, so I think we're moving on to you now, Autumn.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, so I was going to talk a little bit about the intended outcomes of the project. And I guess I just wanted to say at the outset is that many of you may be aware of some of the evidence base around the needs of people who have experienced rape or sexual violence in its many forms. There are a lot of statistics from the World Health Organization and also from government that suggest this is a huge and significant problem across many societies. It's often unreported, and we know from much research over many, many years that there can be a lot of outcomes for people from that experience. Everyone's experience is different, obviously, and unique to them, but there are common features. So some people will experience post-traumatic stress. Some people will experience social isolation and a loss of confidence, a loss of social networks. It's a hugely stigmatizing experience. So we have a huge wealth of evidence to say that these experiences can be incredibly damaging and difficult for people. And we also know that we're not always very good as societies at responding to these experiences. both through our justice systems. So we know we're not very good at that, but we also know that we're not very good at offering people timely therapeutic intervention. But we do know that if we do provide support early and support that meets people where they are and what they need, it can make a huge difference to the outcomes. So this project was really thinking on that and thinking about how can the offer in the garden and through the craft work that was undertaken, how can that meet the needs of these women, and they were all women who had experienced these things and were struggling with their mental health and with different things in their lives. So there's a list there of lots of things, and I think it was about meeting the needs of the body for relaxation, but also helping psychologically, you know, getting time out in a space that was safe. So improved mood and reducing feelings of stress and anxiety. There was a lot of movement in the garden. Obviously, gardening is a physical activity. So for a lot of the women who hadn't had a lot of physical activity, it was benefiting their body. Sorry, my cat showed up to try and help with the presentation at this moment, but also to connect with other people and with the local community, to reduce loneliness and to help people connect with nature. So there were a lot of hoped for outcomes, which were based on evidence from projects before, but also the practice wisdom of other groups that had been working at Birkhill House already. I think it's the next slide now, Emma. Yeah, so one of the things that really impressed me about this project when I first met Lara and Emma and Sunshine was just how thoughtfully they had considered how to evaluate this project. So as Lara said, it was an 18-month project, and after each block they had questionnaires, so they were regularly getting feedback from participants about the impact of the work on them. They also were doing diary work with the participants themselves. So those were their own personal reflections, but they would often, the participants would share those with Lara and Sunshine and Emma as well as they wanted. But one of the really wonderful and innovative things I think they did was to have a kind of more creative evaluation process. So this is an image from a felt flower display that was made. And the idea behind it was to kind of creatively allow participants to think about how they were feeling when they were entering the space at the beginning, and then to think about how they were feeling at the end of the day. And it was a kind of more creative and playful way of trying to get a sense of the impact of each session with the participants. So I think it's really lovely and nice that it was drawing on images of flowers in the garden to do that. So I'm sure you might have questions about this from Lara at the end, but they were Velcro flowers, and again it was trying to reflect the kind of state of mind that people were in. So that was the methodology for the actual evaluation of the project. But I also wanted to say something about the methodology that we used for coming up with the research article. So when I got involved in the project, I knew Emma because she was an alum from the University of Edinburgh, and we were meeting to talk about all the wonderful work she's doing, and she's kind of helping to educate me about social and therapeutic horticulture. And she was telling me about this project and saying, oh, you know, they've got all this data from their questionnaires, from this creative evaluations they've done. And, you know, wouldn't it be great to do something more with this and get the word out about this project? So I suggested, let's try and actually write an article for a journal, drawing together what they had learned. So what we did together was first, Lara, Emma, and Sunshine did some reflective writing about what they felt they had learned and what they felt participants had gained through the project. And they had these eyes and ears notes that they had kept during the project, their own reflections as practitioners. So they had this wealth of information to help them remember all the stuff that had happened and what they'd learned during the project. So they went back to those notes and wrote up their own kind of reflective thoughts on that, to kind of capture all the different things they felt had happened and had benefited the participants. And then together, we also reviewed all the questionnaire data again. So me as an outsider coming in, it was all anonymized, and there was permission for it to be shared in this way by participants, but I had a look through it as well. And so then we had a series of kind of 4 sessions together where we did some collaborative analysis and thought about, well, what are the themes, the most prominent themes in the data that we've got, both across the reflections and the questionnaire data. And then together we undertook a collaborative writing process to produce the article that was eventually published in the Journal of Practice, which is the social work practice oriented journal. And some of the benefits that were reported, sorry, that's my cat. Some of the benefits were reported are listed there. So that's from the questionnaire data about the therapeutic benefits. And you can see that there's lots around there about reducing isolation and participation with other people and feeling happier and crucially more confident. If you want to move to the next slide, Emma.
I'm on the benefits slide, Lara. Do you want the one after that?
Yes, please. Yeah. So what we then did, so that's a kind of snapshot of the benefits of the previous slide, but what we then did is we really focused in on 3 core themes that we thought best captured the most important things, the most important impacts that the project had for participants. And the first one was about connecting with other people. And this one was really interesting for me because in my work as a social worker and as a researcher, I've done a lot of work on friendship and social connection. And what's really interesting across the literature on trauma of various kinds is how people become disconnected for various reasons. They can be isolated by other people who don't associate them, or they can just withdraw because of their feelings of shame, lack of confidence, all sorts of reasons. But disconnection from others is one of the big impacts that experiences of trauma and sexual violence in particular can have. So it's probably not surprising then that any therapeutic project that's going to be useful for this population is going to help people connect with one another. And this is a beautiful picture here of people sitting down for a meal together. And I think you get a really sense from just this picture about being together and connecting with each other. And there's some lovely quotes from the participants here about that. So one of them says, the camaraderie, being in the company of amazing women who all understand and empathize with each other and all having fun together and learning new skills. I've made new, hopefully lasting friendships. I feel connected, not isolated and lonely as I was before. And another participant says, before coming to Birkhill, I had no friends in Scotland. I felt very alone. Since attending, I've made loads of friends, wonderful ladies who have my back. We all have each other's backs. So these people didn't know each other before the project began, but by being together and gardening together and sharing meals together and crafting together, over time, those connections were built. And it was an 18-month project, so it wasn't rushed. Some people took longer than others to be able to trust and to connect after everything that they've been through. But the project allowed people to do that at a pace that worked for them. And I think that was really important and one of the reasons why it worked so well. You want to move to the next slide? So another theme, the kind of second theme that seemed really, really important across the data was about making something meaningful. And again, if you look at a lot of the literature on trauma, it talks about people kind of feeling a sense of agency has been disrupted, feeling that questioning their role, their place in the world, not feeling included, and making something meaningful, something joyful, feeling that they're part of something and contributing through making, felt like one of the really important things that this project offered. And interestingly, other successful projects have offered, have found something similar. Yeah, so here's one of the reflections from one of the staff members. There's a joy in the making of things that also brings pride and accomplishment. It mimics those wonderful times in childhood when we would find ourselves set adrift in the creative flow of a moment, unaware of other concerns, focused only on the task at hand, happy and present. And again, I think being able to kind of take people out of their worries and just bring people into the present moment, into their body through the making processes was really therapeutic for people. And again, the making of things might be something small or it might be something big. So there were crafting activities. There was obviously dyeing the wool itself, different activities. And, you know, the nice thing about the project was there was a variety of things. So some people liked certain activities more than others, but it gave people a chance to try lots of things. And a number of the participants have carried on with gardening or have carried on with particular crafting activities that they found on this project. And those things remain a kind of a support to them now, a kind of activity that they can do that gives them strength and meaning as well. Next slide, Emma. And these are some of the kind of pictures of some of the things they made in terms of dyeing the paper and making paper. And I'm sure that Lara and Sunshine could probably answer questions about some of the activities that were done at the end if people have things that they want to ask. But I think this is a lovely quote. There's nothing I didn't like. Everything was a learning curve and things that I had never done before, from being in the polytunnel planting seeds to planting them out in the spring and harvesting the dye plants in the summer, making pictures in different way, making wands, dyeing clothes, just absolute magic in everything we did. Sometimes frustrating, but once Lara showed us again, then it clicked. And I think that's a really important point as well, that sometimes people who are seen as victims are kind of wrapped in cotton wool by professionals. And again, having a chance to sometimes try things that were a bit frustrating and that maybe didn't work was actually good and built people's confidence. So it was kind of able to take some risks in a safe environment was really important for people as well. And that quote was just lovely. I loved every minute of my time at Birkhill and I've made friends for life. We've kind of already heard that message. So I think now I'm handing over to Emma to talk a bit more about the final theme, which is about connecting with nature.
Thanks, Autumn. Yeah, so as Autumn mentioned, we grouped the findings into these different themes, and this was the final one that came out really loud and clear, and it was definitely something that people mentioned kind of as soon as they were involved with the project. Birkhill is in a really beautiful spot. There's views of the countryside all around. There are interesting containers of plants growing, lots of lovely trees, and then all the animals. So it's somewhere that people very quickly found that connection with nature. But it is something that, although maybe some of them had perhaps gardened a little bit, a lot of the participants had never gardened before. And they were quite concerned that the things that we were going to try and grow might not grow, that they might plant the seeds wrong, that they might not care for them properly. And it was in some ways, like Lara mentioned, another way of, that Autumn mentioned, another way of taking a risk in a kind of safe place where, you know, the worst thing that could happen was that the seeds wouldn't grow and we would try again. And it became quite a source of excitement and anticipation for the women coming in each time to see had the seeds germinated, and actually everything germinated really well. They were really well cared for by the women and by Lara and others at Birkhill between sessions. They really loved going into the polytunnel when things were starting out to water new plants and new seedlings and just watch those changes happening week by week. So it gave them really quickly a sense of accomplishment and sort of seeing that the things that they were doing were working out well and they could turn their hand to something new and it would go okay. We wanted to mention here as well the different sorts of people that came and took part. So there was a huge range of ages in terms of the women that took part, ranging from sort of 20s all the way up to the other ages, all the way up to retirement ages. And there were some women through all those ages that struggled with their mobility, or maybe hadn't moved very much for a while, and found that sort of physical part of gardening quite intimidating to begin with. So we had to make sure we started slowly, and we adapted the spaces to make sure there was seating at each spot so they could take breaks when they wanted to, and we planned breaks into the sessions as well. But that moving and over time taking part in gardening, so when we moved out to the dye garden itself and started to make the beds and plant out the new little plants, it was more physical, and people were wheelbarrowing compost and laying down cardboard and moving slabs to make to make the edges of raised beds. So over time, people's stamina did improve, and I think that was also an area that helped them to feel more confident that they could go outside, move their bodies, do something physical, and that it could be fun and enjoyable, not something that was necessarily tricky like they had imagined at the beginning. I think I'm on to my next slide. And then, as with all the others, we pulled out some quotes from the information that Lara and Sunshine had kept over the sessions. And we had lots of lovely quotes from the women, sort of outlining different aspects of that connection with nature that they found most helpful. So for some of them, it was that learning about plants, learning about the dyes that could be extracted from them, and starting to see that they could take that home and have a go at growing either the plants that we were growing or growing new things. And it started to become a bit of a thing where the women would come in and ask me about something that they were growing at home. Oh, I'm growing a rose, this isn't working, what could I do instead? So they were starting to just sort of engage with the gardening world and have a go back at home as well. As I mentioned before, that seeing the difference each week, I think that was a real positive for a lot of the women that attended, and a real sense of achievement. And then for some people, it was a return to that connection with nature that they had already had, but maybe had lost. There were some women who mentioned not really going out very much, other than coming to Birkhill. So for them, it was a real chance to reconnect with nature after losing that through feeling too anxious to go out and about. And like I mentioned, starting to do things in their own gardens again. That time outdoors, there's so much research around the benefits of being outside, the benefits of engaging with gardening activities. And that was mentioned by lots of the women as being a real benefit for them, just being out in the fresh air. And I like that quote, spending time outdoors has been wonderful, fresh air, dirty hands, total bliss, even if it's only for a couple of hours a week. So that was that mention of people not always being out and about very much. So Birkhill was that real chance for them to get outside and connect with other people. And then not to forget the animals. So there's an amazing collection of all sorts of different interesting and character-filled animals at Birkhill, which provided a safe place for the women. A lot of the women enjoyed sort of spending a bit of time at each session just going around to see the animals. And some of the animals have funny characters, so it brought a sort of sense of fun to the sessions. And the cats were a big presence, always around in the outside areas and also inside. So I think those animals, for some people, allowed them to settle in as well. It was a real way to kind of arrive at Birkhill and connect with the animals as soon as they arrived. It took away that anxiety-provoking thing of arriving at a new place and having to speak to all these new people. They could spend some time with the animals as well. Okay, so I think we're on to Lara and Autumn here. I don't know how you want to, Lara, if you want to go ahead first, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I had put together, sort of précis, like a list after the project had ended, just identifying what sorts of things we would want to draw out and carry over, and what things might actually need reviewed. So obviously, number one is always a challenge for future funding. The project was only possible in terms of staffing and materials, the time. because we had managed to get that government grant at the start. And so that, you know, when the money finished, we weren't able to offer those group settings any longer. So there is that challenge of kind of finding funding to keep supporting the development and growth of the project. It was clear that it was made easier by partnering with another organization, because directly after the project ended, we put a lot of effort into trying to set up our own kind of drop-in, and it was difficult to get the numbers that we needed to engage to kind of keep up with the work necessary in the garden. And so it was really valuable to have partnered with SBRCC, who had their group coming along. Staff well-being, you know, it was kind of highlighted that it could, some sessions sometimes had difficult elements, and that we all needed to feel that we were supported in what we were supporting as well. So that became an area where we were kind of highlighted and wanted to look at what could be done to make sure that staff were feeling supported through it. There was always the feedback, was that people wanted to be here longer. That, you know, whenever the sessions ended, it was a real, oh, is it really time to go? So there's a look at that. Shorter blocks, meaning possibly not as long as an 18-month. That was because it was very hard for the cohort at the end to kind of give up their weekly slot. They'd become, you know, they'd been through 2 growing seasons here. And it was a bit of a wrench to kind of finish off and have that ending. And it took a lot of processing and a lot of support to kind of end it well. Yeah, the journaling, we had made a journal with them about halfway through, and that really took off as a way for them to record their reflections. It was mentioned earlier in the presentation. And so we had thought that perhaps if there were shorter blocks that would start with a journaling session, that would start with the creation of a journal, and then that could be filled with the materials that were created in the crafting aspect, and also filled with reflections along the way, might be a better way to structure and kind of format the offering. Yeah, and now, I mean, the focus for us really is still just getting the word out, you know, to GPs, link workers, social and green prescribers. Like, we're still looking for people to be involved, and, you know, groups and individuals to be involved with the project here. And obviously we would welcome further research and evaluation as well as we go forward. Autumn, I don't know if you have things you'd like to add.
No, I mean, I think you've kind of said it all. I think there's a wider issue about how this work is kind of valued at the government level and properly funded, and kind of sustainably funded. Because I think one of the reasons why we wanted to write the journal article was to make sure that the practice wisdom that had been gleaned over the course of this project was shared widely, and that other people in different places could build on the methodology and think it through. But I think this kind of stop-start funding that we have for a lot of this kind of work is difficult for a discipline that's trying to develop its evidence base and its practice wisdom. So that's a kind of good job for policymakers and politicians to hear that message. But also, I think like for me, because a lot of the writing I've done is based on my own kind of research projects that I've run from the beginning, this is an interesting experiment to see, well, how could we draw together everything you'd learn, and how could I help you package that up in a kind of academic way for the article. And I think I'm really excited to encourage other practitioners, other organizations, other projects to think about writing for publication, because of the way that it opens up to wider audiences. And we know it works and we have evidence of that, but we need to convince the people with the power and the money to really see that and acknowledge that. And so the more evidence we have in different places of that, I think the more strength we have to our arguments. So I think that's important. And I know Trellis is supporting a lot of different types of evaluation work here in Scotland, and I'm sure in people's context they're thinking about that too. But I also wonder about whether we can connect up projects that are similar to kind of bring the wealth of evidence all together. And that's one of the things that I'm wondering about next, is how that might be done. You know, so for example, we had a student-led project last year that was kind of looking at mental health across a number of different gardens that were trying to target mental health and to think about the learning that might be shared. So we're hoping to write that up at a later date. And we've got a project this year that's looking at older adults in care homes and the impact of gardening and the challenges to ensuring gardening is happening in care homes. So there's some ongoing work, but I guess I just want to really acknowledge Lara and Sunshine and Emma for being such trailblazers, and yeah, and I just want to dive into that garden now. I wish we could all transport just now into the garden and have a cup of tea together, have a cat in our lap, and take our questions there rather than online. But I don't know if we're at the end, if we've got another slide, Emma. I've lost track. Okay. That sounded like the end.
Thank you, Autumn.
Okay, I'll stop sharing. Okay, and I'll hand over to Jenny. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much to Emma, Lara, and Autumn there for absolutely fascinating insight to the project at the Dye Garden and to Birkhill itself. We have probably have some questions here. There's two already. There's a few in here. So what I'm going to ask people to do is I'm just going to unspotlight people so that we can see everyone if we can on the screen, and then we can perhaps have a bit more of a conversation. If we can all see each other, that's lovely. So what I'd like you to do, if you go down to the three dots at the bottom of your screen and click on the bit that says reactions, you get an opportunity to raise your hand there. If you have a question and you've popped it into the chat, please raise your hand. Click that, raise your hand, and it'll come up to the top of my screen, and I'll invite you to unmute and ask your question out loud. If you could do that, that would be great. I'll just have a look. First question was about sharing slides, and I think that came from Nicola. Nicola asked the question. She said, "Good morning. Will the slides be sent in the follow-up email also?" Perhaps that's one for you ladies to answer.
I think so. I think we were going to share them, weren't we, Emma? Yeah.
Yeah. They're Lara's photos, so I'll double check with Lara. Yeah, that looks like a yeah.
You all right, Lara?
Yes, sorry, I'm muted. Yes, I have permissions for those to be used and shared, so.
That's perfect. That's lovely. Well, we'll add that. We have a follow-up email that goes out, so anything that we want to be shared, just send it to me and I'll pop that. It goes out tomorrow, so it goes to everyone that's appeared today, that's come along today. So that's lovely. So that was our first question. And then now Helen has a question about the service and about being able to be picked up. Helen, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Hello, hi Lara, and lovely to see you again. I missed the bit about the transport. You said that the participants were picked up, which I'm sure was a huge help to getting people there and there on time, and also to encourage people to actually come, knowing that that was all sorted for them. Were they picked up by their support worker or?
No, it was a taxi service.
A taxi service.
Yep. It was a taxi service, and it was a minibus, so it went round the houses and got everybody.
Right.
It was the same driver, yeah.
So that's amazing.
Yeah, because a lot of them felt they developed a rapport and felt very supported, and there wasn't that anxiety about who's getting me, and also there wasn't the anxiety about traveling alone in a car. Yeah.
And also that somebody's coming to get you, so it almost encourages you out the door, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So
And
great.
they reflected on that. They would say, "Oh, I wasn't going to come this morning," but then I heard the chap on the door, and then I was out the door. So yeah, it helped a lot.
Perfect, thank you.
And the one-to-one workers came separately, so they would often arrive a bit early and kind of get the lay of the land and figure out what was going to happen in that session, and then get ready. Well, and then everyone would arrive.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Julia, would you like to voice your question?
Yeah, hello. Thank you so much. That was just lovely to hear about. So interesting. I'm just wondering, So I work for the Children and Young People Centre for Justice. So I work with children and young people in the community, but also predominantly with children who are in secure care or custody. Um, and I just wonder if you've thought about like developing this in a way where it could be almost kind of mobile. I know obviously like having the garden is a huge part of it, and it's something that, you know, I think that a lot of the children I work with would really benefit from, but they don't really have the ability to go out and visit spaces like this. And I don't know if there's like some way that it could be something that's kind of potted up and moved around.
Gosh, I hadn't thought about it. I mean, because it is so kind of based around the environment here, and it's like the garden is being in the garden and coming away from their own setting is kind of part of the offering.
So the progress of it's a long time this season to see a big part of it is seeing the progress of things growing from, you know, barren ground and stuff. I don't know how you would do that in a mobile way.
I think it would be a different offering.
Yeah.
You could certainly have plants and that you would bring, and you could show, you know, dried harvest. I think it would be more of a kind of sort of show and tell, which isn't to say that you wouldn't get some kind of benefit therapeutically, but it may be different. Yeah,
You could do a sort of an exploration of like discovering the color that already surrounds you. Like we've done stuff with another group where we went to the river and we all chose different plants and then came and died with them back at the thing. So it's more of a location type thing. So if you had some of the things, you could maybe go out on a wee field trip locally and see what nature surrounded you, and that sort of helps you look at normal everyday like weeds and things around you in a different way. So it doesn't have to be an ornate garden,
and that might be a nice
enjoying.
way to tie to to location and to
Yeah.
setting. Yeah, so I think that there might be sort of permutations of what went on here that would be possible. But yeah, but particularly us, I've never thought about kind of traveling out with it. It is more about kind of getting groups to come to us.
I can see Emma Emma, you've got some ideas on this as well, and I wanted to say something too, but you go first.
Yeah, so I guess some of the work I do with Trellis and other colleagues like Joan, who's here, and Jenny, we do go out to places that don't have a garden, and we do therapeutic horticulture activities. Like Joan's been working with a cancer support group recently, and I've done some sessions with children with additional support needs in a school. And there definitely are activities you can kind of box up and bring with you. One that we've run a lot recently has been making herbal bath bags. So we arrive with the resources like different herbs, and people can make up little bath bags to take home. So there definitely are, you know, you could create your own box of tricks for sure. I have in my cupboard behind me a big box of pressed flowers. They come out often to sessions, even if I don't know what I'm going to use them for. They're almost like my own personal security blanket, you know, because I know I can do something crafty. Everyone engages really well with pressed flowers and with lots of other kind of plant materials. And we have got some session ideas on the Trellis website, and through the Trellis membership as well. You can get access to lots of activity ideas that are kind of standalone and don't necessarily require a garden space. But I do think that what Lara and Sunshine were saying in terms of getting away was a big part for this particular group, but it doesn't mean that you can't have a go at doing things. You definitely can. Awesome.
I was just going to say to Julia that I think it's interesting to think about, because I've worked in secure units and done a bit of research on that. Obviously, it's a very traumatized population, so you could really see the benefits of this kind of work. You know, of maybe thinking creatively with some of your colleagues about, you know, how you might do, you know, some planting, try different things, but also kind of talking to the young people. I went to this really fantastic workshop. I'm going to put it in the the chat, there's a new book called The Understory by an artist named Anna Chapman Parker, and it's called A Year Among the Weeds. And she ran a beautiful workshop where, we collected weeds and we did writing and drawing around them. And I was thinking how actually you could adapt that with lots of children and young people as well, because it's a very accessible way of getting in touch with plants that, if you've got a little patch of any patch of ground, there's likely to be something growing. And just taking attention to that sometimes can be fun, and there's different things that you can do with it. But also it would be interesting to do a bit more of a review of the literature on. There's a lot around prisons and using gardening in prisons, but less in terms of residential childcare and secure care in particular. So anyway, if you ever want to have a chat about that, it's interesting to think about, well, what's the existing evidence base about what's been done with this particular population? And there's a lot going on in the US as well in prisons. So maybe there's learning that you could take across and adapt to the constraints that you face where you are. I'd be happy. I'll put my email in the chat if you ever want to have a chat with me about it. I'll just do that now.
That's great. Thank you all so much.
Oh, Jenny, you're muted.
There we go. There's a question in the chat here from Jessica. Jessica was asking how much was the initial grant and how many staff hours did that cover a week? Could you give us a bit of an idea of that, maybe Lara?
I've just had to go rifling back through all my files. It's like, I remember that it was £11,000. The staff hours amounted to, oh gosh, it was 3 hours a week.
Yeah.
9 to 12, 10 to 12:30, 2.5 staff hours a week for 2 of us. And then we had some prep time as well, which amounted to about an hour every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So there was all of those hours over 18 months. And then SBRCC were paying into the project by supporting the transport costs and the salary or the sessional pay for the one-to-one workers.
Right.
So I don't have a project total, but our contribution from the grant that we secured was £11,000, which I thought it went really far. We did a lot of work for that amount of money.
Yeah, and you had sort of match, well, not match funding, but additional costs covered by the other group. Yeah.
Yeah, SBRCC uptook. Yeah.
Okay, hope that answers your question there. Angela is offering some further information. She said you could forage or buy flowers and leaves. Excuse me, and do flower pounding or dyeing fabric and other crafts. Oh, she also says that you could see if there's an opportunity to set up a garden somewhere. I think this must be directed to you, Julia. And she says she's done that in acute psychiatric units, so that's quite interesting. A place to develop some gardening. Well, there's opportunities everywhere, isn't there? If we can, and it doesn't have to be a garden.
If the intention is to plant a garden that's specifically designed for dyeing,
yeah,
it would be worth doing a bit of research into some of the more established and long-standing dye plants, the ones that have been used for sort of thousands of years, because they tend to give the most fast colors. So you can collect whatever, and you can pretty much dye with anything.
Yeah, everything will give something, mostly yellow.
Mostly yellow. Yellow's your default color, but what you'll find is that a lot of that color is fugitive, or it will very quickly fade through use, or in sunshine, or so it's worth, if the intention is to set up specifically a dye garden, it's worth investing some time in doing some research into how you will develop your dye practice as well. So it's beyond just the propagation of the sowing and the propagation of the plants. It's also going to be, well, how do we extract the color, and how fast and useful is this color going to be in our crafting projects afterwards? Just though we asked those two sets of questions rather than just the first, about the actual planting of the garden and things like that. So I think it's worth having that as part of your consideration.
Absolutely. And can I ask you what, excuse me, what did you use the dye for? I saw hanks of, it looked like wool, but I don't know if it was it wool that was hanging up in one of the photographs?
Oh, we did lots of different things. We dyed like sort of yarn and fibers that were used for weaving and sort of crochet and knitting. We did a lot of eco-printed fabric, some sort of paper dyeing. We basically used it on everything we could.
Yeah. Batik, we did batik with indigo.
Batik. It was really good. Sort of the women were open to do anything. So we basically could sort of do a lot of experimenting and stuff to see what worked the best. The only sort of criteria that we had was that we had to work the things into the sort of session hours, whereas some natural dye processes can take really long time. So we might pre-prepare some stuff so that the actual sort of fun bit was done during the session. But everybody went away with loads of stuff. We did tie-dye. Everybody brought in clothes.
Yeah.
And we did tie-dye with them. So I think initially they liked sort of the more exciting colors that we had bought in, because you could get like purples and reds and pinks that are sort of from heartwoods that don't grow in Scotland. By the end of the session, they were more in love with the things that they had grown.
Yeah.
Because they could see that they grew that from just a seed, and now they had a shirt, or, we did eco-printed socks. Like, it was all things that they could have and actually hold. Yeah, we just tried everything.
We did a lot of stuff in 18 months. Because every week we tried to have there be a mix between something that was gardening and then create, a creative aspect to it. Although we could, if it was a blazingly gorgeous day, we would usually be out in the garden pretty much the whole time to take advantage of that weather. Yeah.
And a lot of their creations ended up being in their journals, didn't they? And they had the most beautiful looking journals that were kind of a scrapbook and a journal with writing around the things that they've done. So they've got this real memory bank of all the things they did with them at home.
Yeah. That's lovely. A lovely thing to have and to reflect on later.
Yeah.
Nicola, you've had your hand up. Please unmute and chat.
Hi, good morning. How are you? I have to say I'm fascinated. I've been working in rate prices for 30 years here in Ireland, and this has given me just so many ideas. And so my question is, okay, so the nearest garden that I would have access to from the centre where we are based is, we say, a good 40 minutes away. So how far away were people living to where they were accessing the garden?
Of 40 minutes or beyond.
Yeah. About
40-45 minutes was our radius around us. Yeah.
And the Rate Crisis Centre was a bit, 20-25 minutes away, wasn't it, as well? So everyone had a journey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And you had a rape crisis worker with you on site?
Yes.
Okay. So could I ask for 2 salaries then? I do both. It's worth it. Listen, I have to say, absolutely fantastic. Just brilliant. And I am full of ideas this morning.
Wonderful.
So huge thank you. Huge thank you.
Well, I'd love to hear what happens. Like, drop us a line and let us know.
Absolutely. If you put your email in the chat, absolutely I will. Brilliant.
Thank you, Nicola. Joan.
Hello, that was so interesting. Thank you so much. Emma, you'd touched on it. I'd heard wee bits from you over the period, but to hear everyone pull the whole story together was really interesting. I guess what I want to know now is the project at present, who's coming along to it, how is it funded? And you mentioned that some of the ladies, the women that attended the group, had sort of continued with their own gardening, and do any of them come separately, you know, off their own backs currently?
Do you want to talk about the Wednesday sessions?
Yeah, so we've got sort of a group on Wednesday. It's just a drop-in. So we've got a few regulars, a mom and a daughter. So it's a different group of people, not necessarily, you know, from the SBRCC. Anybody can come, so volunteer and be in the garden. So it's not as well subscribed, and it's ad hoc. So we might get like 3 or 4 people one week and no people the next week. So a lot of it, the maintaining the garden, is sort of down to me and the other people here at Birkhill.
And the volunteers.
Yeah. So without like having a dedicated group, it's sort of, we've just got the garden space and we're doing things sort of with the harvests and stuff with it for whatever groups come, without that long range plan at the moment.
Our ideal would be to get in
Yeah.
another cohort, but I think we would do it shorter. I think we would do like maybe an 8-week or possibly a 10 or 12-week block, like maybe through a growing season. Part of the issue now is the funding that we have is National Lottery funding, but that only pays for salaried hours for Sunshine to lead the sessions. So we don't have any money for materials. So a lot of the crafting things that we would have done with the group have fallen away, and the focus really is just on the dye garden. And although you can pass down knowledge and you can show, Sunshine always tries to have like maybe a pot bubbling away to say, well, that grows into this and this is the color that's given. It's not as instructional, and it's not as
there's not as much takeaway that people can have a physical thing to take away with them, because that would come at a cost to us for materials.
Yeah, so I'd love to partner with another group who was able to put together a funding application of their own to kind of spend here, you know, and I could input and help to track costs with them. But that would be our ideal, is to find another concerted cohort, because that seemed to be how the work had the most benefit, was this group that had gelled together.
We do have some of the ladies from the initial group that
do.
still come.
We do.
They come and volunteer with the animals and with the garden.
Yeah.
So that's been really good, and they sort of update us on a lot of the other ladies.
Yeah,
in the group.
they do. They're
So
all still meeting up.
Yeah, they're still doing things together, which is really good to hear.
They had a meetup last Sunday.
Did they?
Yeah. It was really lovely.
Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We've got time for one last question. Has anyone got anything they wanted to bring up before we draw it to a close? I see lots of comments there. And Autumn, you're talking about the journals that were, that's great, isn't it? Just such a good way of seeing people's journey through the weeks that you were doing it.
Yeah, and having that to own and look back on, you know, that we just know that helps for lots of trauma. There's lots of evidence about that. So I think it's an interesting thing that's probably not, I mean, I don't know, Emma would know, but like it's probably not as widespread as it could be, that journaling is something that could run alongside garden activity without too much effort. I mean, the journals that you guys made were gorgeous, but you know, you could do something less fancy and still have it be, you know, and then well, of course people can choose to use it or not, but giving space to that is quite a nice idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. A very big thank you to Autumn and Emma and Lara and Sunshine. Thank you so very much for sharing all that with us. It's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. Thanks everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. I wonder if you put your hands together for a bit of a clap and acknowledge everybody's contribution. Thank you so much. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thanks everyone.